as Manasik rituals of Hajj in brief. This book details the jurisprudence related to Hajj as per the rulings of Ayatullah al-Uzma, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Topics such as conditions that make Hajj obligatory, rites of Hajj and Umrah, their respective requirements and prohibitions have been discussed. Get PDF 3, get EPUB 4, get Mobi 5. Introduction. The Hajj in Islam, being incumbent upon a mustadi, is not obligatory for more than once in the entire lifetime of an individual. The obligation of Hajj is immediate for a mustadi, i.e. the Hajj should be performed in the first year of istita, and any delay in it is not permissible. In case of delay, the obligation still remains and it should be performed in the following years. If after istita, Hajj requires preliminaries like travel provisions, these should be arranged for, so that the Hajj could be performed in the very first year of istita in case of dereliction of the individual such that he could not go on Hajj in that year. The Hajj obligation remains and should be fulfilled later on under any conditions, even if the status of istita is lost. Conditions for the obligation of Hajj in Islam. Several conditions make the Hajj obligatory, and without all of them the Hajj would not be obligatory. A and B. Maturity and sanity. Hajj is not incumbent on the children and the insane. If a child is made muhrim for Hajj and becomes religiously mature in the process of the pilgrimage, the Hajj would be acceptable as the required Hajj of Islam. One who thought that he was religiously immature and went on a Sibabi Hajj and then realized that he was religiously mature cannot consider his Hajj as the required Hajj of Islam, unless he had made the niyat to perform the Hajj, which the divine legislator Allah the Almighty decreed for him. Atonement for hunting rests with the guardian. Other types of atonements obviously do not rest with either the guardian or the child. In Hajj, the child's guardian should procure sheep for sacrifice. Having financial istita, physical health and ability, and free access and sufficient time. Financial istita means having provisions for the Hajj journey and the means of conveyance for it. If the likes of these are not possessed, something such as money or another commodities should be available for possible use to obtain the required provisions. It is a condition that the individual should financially afford his return trip. Other issues related to istita will be subsequently explained. For Hajj to become obligatory, the individual should be able to afford expenses of departure and return. In addition, he should have whatever is imperative for a living and sustenance, such as a residence, household appliances, automobile and the like, in accordance with his social standing and honor. In case he lacks these things, he should possess money or anything else with which he could provide them. One who needs to get married and for whom abstaining from marriage would result in disease or the commitment of sin and forbidden acts, and who needs money for marriage, would become mustadi when the marriage expenses are met in addition to the Hajj expenditures. If one has money owed to him and possesses the rest of the conditions for istita, he should receive the amount owed to him if the due time of payment has arrived, provided he could obtain it without difficulty. Then he should go on Hajj. If one who does not afford Hajj obtains a loan to cover its expenses, he will not become mustadi, and the Hajj he performs will not be considered the required Hajj of Islam. One who can afford Hajj expenses but has debt as well should go on Hajj if he has time for repayment and he is confident that when repayment time comes he can afford to repay his debt. The same rule applies to a case when repayment time approaches yet the creditor agrees to defer repayment and the debtor is confident that he can repay it at the determined time. Apart from these two cases, Hajj will not be regarded as obligatory. If the high expenses of the Hajj do not make the prospective pilgrim unable to afford the pilgrimage, this will not remove the obligation of Hajj, unless such expenses cause distress and difficulty for him. For those who have extra equipment which they do not require at the moment, and which if sold would cover the Hajj expenses, Hajj is obligatory, provided that they meet all other conditions for the pilgrimage. If one doubts whether his property is sufficient enough to make him mustadi for Hajj, it is obviously necessary for him to study the matter. There is no difference regarding the necessity of study and investigation in this matter between the one who does not know the amount of actual estimate of his property and the one who does not know Hajj expenditures. One who knows that under the normal conditions and the expenses of Hajj he would not have istita, but who believes that possibly through study and investigation he could find ways to go on Hajj under his present conditions. does not need to embark on such investigation. But for one who does not know whether or not he has istitah for Hajj, it is obviously obligatory to take proper stock of his present financial conditions. One who is employed to render services to the pilgrims and who could meantime perform all Hajj rites and could earn his living upon return would be considered as having istitah for Hajj. Hajj is obligatory for him, and he would meet the requirements of the Hajj in Islam, even though it is obligatory for him to be hired. Among conditions for istitah, the individual should be able to meet expenses of his family members of the household which are dependent on him until his return from Hajj. An istitah arising through competence, i.e. upon return from Hajj, the person has to engage in trade, agriculture, and industrial activity or have properties such as orchards and shops in order not to face distress and difficulty in making his living. If he were able to engage in a business befitting his place and position, it would suffice. If upon return he could make his living with allowance, it would also suffice. As a result, Hajj is obligatory for students of theological seminaries who, upon return from Hajj, would require allowances of the theological seminaries and who could make a living with such allowances. Conditions for the obligation of Hajj is physical ability, as well as openness of the route and availability of time. Therefore, Hajj is not obligatory for a sick person who lacks the physical strength to go on Hajj or who faces great distress and difficulty in doing so. The same applies to a person to whom the route for Hajj is closed or who faces time shortage such that he could not go on Hajj in due time. If, while having istitah, a person abstains from going on Hajj, he will be committing a sin and is duty-bound to go on Hajj in any way possible. The mustadi should personally perform Hajj. Deputation of Hajj would not suffice for him, unless for one who cannot perform Hajj due to old age and sickness. One who is personally mustadi cannot become a representative to perform another person's Hajj. If such a Hajj on deputation is performed, it will be null and void. If one who is required to go on Hajj pilgrimage passes away before fulfilling this obligation, his Hajj should be performed with what he has left behind, and a Hajj Mikati will suffice in such a case. Miscellaneous issues of istitah. A woman who lacked financial means during her husband's lifetime acquires the financial means for Hajj after his death through his inheritance, but since she has an illness that prevents her from going on Hajj, she will not be called a mustadi and Hajj is not obligatory for her. Likewise, if, after becoming a widow, she does not have a job, farming or industrial occupation with which to earn a living upon return from Hajj, she will not become mustadi, even if what she has received as inheritance is enough for her to go on Hajj and return. A woman whose marriage portion is equal to or more than the Hajj expenses is a mustadi for Hajj, provided she can obtain her marriage portion without causing trouble and difficulty for her husband. A woman whose marriage portion is sufficient for Hajj and is of the same by her husband, since he cannot afford to pay it, does not have the right to demand the marriage portion and is not mustadi. If a person has a very expensive house and can go on Hajj with the difference earned through selling it and buying a cheaper one, should not sell the house if it is not higher than his status and position. In this case, he is not a mustadi. If the house is more than his social standing, he is a mustadi, provided all other conditions are met. Those who can meet the expenses of the Hajj journey through business or other means and who upon return can meet a part of their expenses through earnings such as preaching and the remaining part from allowances through legal sources, theological schools are mustadi, even if they need the allowance to meet their expenses upon return from Hajj. If one sells a piece of land or something else to buy a house, he will not become mustadi in case he needs the money to buy a house, even if the money is sufficient to cover the Hajj expenses. When the due time for Hajj arrives, the mustadi cannot dispense with his status of istitah, and before this time, based on ihiyat wajib, he should not dispense with the status istitah. If a person who is hired to go on Hajj on behalf of another person who is not a mustadi at the time of concluding the contract, but who before the Hajj became a mustadi through means other than the sum of the contract, should cancel the contract and perform his own obligation of the Hajj in Islam. Caravan attendants who arrive in Jeddah would become mustadi if, while serving the Hajj pilgrims, they are able to perform all Hajj rites and rituals and meet all other conditions of istitah. For instance, having actual or potential means of earning a living and being competent for a job or industrial and other ability with which they could earn a proper living upon return. These persons should perform the Hajj in Islam that fulfills their obligation of Hajj. If the caravan attendants do not meet the required conditions, they are not mustadi and their Hajj will be istihbabi, but they should perform the obligatory Hajj if they later become mustadi. It is incumbent on the physicians and other people who come to Miqat on duty and who meet all conditions of istita and Miqat to perform the Islamic obligation of Hajj, even though it is necessary for them to carry out their duties as well. One who has financial capability and meets other conditions of istita should go on Hajj. Performing other good deeds such as visiting the holy sites or building mosques will not substitute the obligation of going on Hajj. If during the obligatory Hajj, the mustadi were to make the intention of istibad due to negligence or on the assumption of not having attained istita, or even consciously and willfully with the aim of practice for performing the obligatory Hajj better the following year, there is a degree of doubt for the fulfillment of Hajj unless the intention for the Hajj was according to what has been decreed by the divine legislator. On this basis, as a matter of ihtiyat, he should go on Hajj the next year. If the mustadi passes away after putting on the ihram and entering the sacred mosque, the Hajj obligation will be removed from him. If the deceased person was mustadi in his lifetime and deliberately delayed the Hajj pilgrimage, Hajj remains due on him and a Hajj Miqati should be performed for him from what he has left. For one who meets all the conditions of mustadi for Hajj but has not performed it, the obligation of Hajj remains. Even if due to old age or an incurable disease it is not possible for that person to go on Hajj, in the latter case the person should send a representative to perform Hajj on his behalf. A wife does not require the permission of her husband to go on obligatory Hajj, and she should perform her obligatory Hajj even if her husband does not approve of her traveling for Hajj. Family, in case of financial istitah for which nafaka is a requisite, refers to a person's formal family, though it may not be religiously qualified for his maintenance allowance. Question 1. Suppose a person becomes ill in Madinah, say if he undergoes an apoplexy and is hospitalized for 2 weeks by the doctors. If after convalescence it is difficult to take him to Mecca to perform the Hajj rites, what is his duty? Answer. If it is the first year of istitah and the person lacks the strength, even for an emergency case, to carry out the Hajj rites, the status of istitah will become null and void, and the Hajj will not be obligatory. If, however, it is not the first year of istitah and the Hajj is already incumbent on him and the person is despaired of regaining health, then a substitute should carry out the rites of Umrah and Tamattu. Question 2. At present, those who want to perform the Hajj pilgrimage should register their names in advance and make the necessary arrangements. If the turn of a person takes several years to come, and before the coming of the turn that person finds other means of going on Hajj and borrows money and goes to Mecca, will such a pilgrimage be considered the obligatory Hajj of Islam? Answer. If Hajj has not already become incumbent and the person cannot presently go on Hajj without borrowing money, Hajj is not obligatory for him, and such a pilgrimage cannot be considered the obligatory Hajj of Islam. Question 3. I went on Hajj by borrowing money and receiving a month's salary in advance. Since the person who lent the money fully approved of my going on Hajj and did not need his money, would my Hajj be regarded obligatory or not? Answer. If your financial istitah met the required conditions, your Hajj will be correct and deemed obligatory, provided that you can easily repay your debt later on. But if you obtain financial istitah by borrowing money, you have not become mustadi, and your Hajj will not be considered the obligatory Hajj of Islam. Question 4. Based on lots drawn by the Hajj and Pilgrimage Organization, al-SWT willing, I will be able to go on Hajj in the coming years based on the following conditions. A. The entire expenses of the Hajj performed by my spouse and me have been met by comes money. B. I am a school teacher and lead an ordinary life with continence. C. I do not have a house or an automobile of my own. I am a tenant in every city where I work. D. I have ordinary housing appliances. In view of these conditions and doubts raised by others about Hajj being obligatory for my spouse and me, would our Hajj meet conditions necessary for obligation? Answer. As per the conditions cited, if your spouse has enough money to go on Hajj and return, she would be mustadi. You would have istita only when you have household appliances for yourself and your family in accordance with your social position, and when upon return you could make a living for yourself and your family through what you earn. Question 5. If a person was mustadi but neglected to go on Hajj until he lost his turn, now that names are no longer being registered, would it be permissible for him to perform Hajj by way of connections and recommendations inside or outside Iran and through expending huge amounts? This is because otherwise, his duty of fulfilling the obligation would be delayed for years, and he tears that, al-SWT forbid, he would be considered as one who has forsaken Hajj. Answer: he should go on Hajj in any way possible if it does not violate the regulations of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and in a way that he would not face distress and difficulty. Question 6. Supposing Hajj has not already become incumbent on a person, but while registering names for the Hajj, he became mustadi. Later on, he, however, faced financial problems and needed the money he had deposited with the bank for registering his name. Could he withdraw the money or not? Would it make any difference if his turn comes in the first year or in the next years? Answer: based on this supposition, he is not mustadi and can withdraw his money. It would make no difference. Question 7. A person who had to perform the obligatory Hajj departed for Hajj from Pakistan, fell ill in Medina but continued his journey to Mecca in that condition, and passed away in a hospital in Mecca before performing the Hajj. At the time of his death, his entire property consisted of some money and a piece of land in Pakistan. Given the fact that his money is not enough for Hajj on his behalf, should his heirs sell the piece of land and hire someone to fulfill his Hajj, or would the obligation of Hajj no longer be due upon his death? Answer: if he arrived in Mecca with the ihram for Umrah Tamatu and passed away before performing Umrah or after completing its rites, whatever he performed will be accepted and the obligation of Hajj would be removed from him. But if he entered Mecca without ihram for Umrah and passed away there, and in case Hajj had remained incumbent on him, a substitute on his behalf should be hired out of what he has left behind. A Hajj Makati would suffice in such a case. But if Hajj had not remained incumbent on him, he would not be considered a mustadi, and there is no need to hire a person to perform Hajj on his behalf. Question 8. If a person becomes mustadi in Mikat and performs the obligatory Hajj of Islam, would it suffice or not? Would kifaya be a precondition or not? Answer: if he becomes mustadi, it is sufficient, but he should have kifaya. Question 9. In cases where an organization or body sends a person on Hajj without asking him to do anything in return, would it be regarded as Hajj badly, and should it be necessarily accepted? Answer: provided that it is legitimate, it would be Hajj badly if there were no commitment to do anything in return for it. Question 10. A person has 4 sons, all of whom are married, and can meet his annual expenses and has no debts, but he and his sons make their living jointly from the same source of income. Now, since the Hajj expenses of only 2 people can be met, is Hajj obligatory in this case? If so, is it only incumbent on the father or on the sons as well? If Hajj is incumbent on the sons, which one has the priority to perform it? Answer: one who has enough property to meet his Hajj expenses, go to Mecca, and upon return afford a living, which befits him, is mustadi and should perform the Hajj. Question 11. Having financial istita and being 72 years old, I have been prevented from going on Hajj pilgrimage by the health ministry in accordance with domestic laws, as I am addicted to opium. What is to be done from the viewpoint of Sharia? Answer: if you were previously mustadi but did not go on Hajj pilgrimage, you shoulder the duty of going on Hajj. If previously you did not have istita, you are not mustadi under the present conditions, unless you can abandon opium addiction, obtain the required permit, and go to Mecca. Question 12. If a person has capital or equipment and can sell part of it to lead a comfortable life and go on Hajj with the difference, would he be mustadi? Answer: if all the other conditions are met, he will be deemed mustadi. Question 13. A person has an orchard that has not brought him any income for several years, but which, if sold, would cover his Hajj expenses. He is sure that by the time the orchard bears fruit, he would be old and retired and would be dependent on it for his living. Would such a person be mustadi? Answer: if he has no source of income other than the orchard, he will not be considered mustadi. Question 14. In the case of debt, How much money should a person possess to have istitah in case he has the needed money but suffers from cardiac ailment and has been notified by the physicians at the Hajj and Pilgrimage organization that his pilgrimage might be dangerous? Should he substitute someone else? Answer: if before attaining istitah he fell ill and consequently lacked the strength to go to Mecca, he will not become mustadi and there is no need to substitute someone else for Hajj. In addition, financial istitah would develop only when he has enough money for a round trip and can easily repay his debt. Niyabah and Hajj. Conditions of the nabat. Maturity. Confidence in performing the rites. Knowledge of Hajj rites and rituals. Exemption from the obligatory Hajj that particular year. Having no excuses to abstain from certain Hajj rites. Conditions of one for whom a naib is hired. For the obligatory Hajj, the person for whom a naib is hired should be a deceased one, and in case he is alive, Hajj should be incumbent on him. While he cannot personally go on Hajj due to an incurable disease or old age. In the Hajj Istibabi, this is not a condition, and the person who hires a naib does not have to be mature and sane. There is no need for the naib and one who hires him to have familiarity. One who has not so far gone on Hajj and is mustadi can become a naib for another person. Hiring a person who has little time for Hajj at Tamattu and who is compelled to perform the Hajj al-Ifrad is not correct for a person on whom Hajj at Tamattu is incumbent. But if the naib was hired with ample time and then the time ran out, he should engage in udal. This would suffice for Hajj at Tamattu. The naib should be paid in return. One on whom Hajj had become obligatory but had not gone on Hajj pilgrimage in the first year of istitah due to ailment or inability to walk because of old age or of imminent distress and difficulty by going on Hajj should hire a naib in case there is no hope of his recovery. Based on Ihya Wajib, he should immediately hire a naib. If Hajj does not become incumbent on him, he will definitely face no obligation in this regard. When the naib performs the Hajj, the one who hired him does not need to personally go on Hajj later even if the excuse he had no longer exists. But if this excuse is removed before the completion of Hajj, the pilgrimage on behalf will not suffice. One on whom Hajj is incumbent, whether through having istitah or being duty-bound, should not engage in niyabah for another person. If the hired person dies after ihram and entrance into the haram, sacred mosque of the Kaaba, this would suffice for the Hajj of the one whom he represented. But if he dies after ihram and before entrance into the haram, it would not suffice based on Ihya Wajib. In this case, there is no difference whether the Hajj was supererogatory by hire on behalf, the Hajj in Islam, or the obligatory Hajj. The same decree that applies to one who goes on Hajj in person would apply here. If a naib is hired to carry out the religious duty of one who hires him, as is the case for hiring the naib for Hajj, and if he dies after ihram and entrance into the haram, he deserves the entire wage of naib. One who has gone to Mecca as a naib without having personally performed the obligatory Hajj should follow the Ihya Mustahab and, after niyabah, perform Umrah Mufrada for himself. This Ihyat is not binding. Nevertheless, it is highly recommended. One who cannot perform some Hajj rites due to valid reasons cannot be hired as a naib for Hajj. If such a person who has excuses not to perform some rites gratuitously and voluntarily goes on Hajj on behalf of another person, this would not suffice. Secondary issues related to niyabah. The caravan attendants who are compelled to leave Mashar at midnight to perform the required tasks in Mina or who have to accompany the weak pilgrims to Mina would be among those having excuses for not being able to have ikhtiyari wukuf in Mashar. Therefore, their niyabah will be invalid. But if they have been hired as a naib before employment as a caravan attendant, they have to perform the Hajj and observe ikhtiyari wukuf. For a living person who can hire a naib, it would suffice to employ the naib at the miqat. One who performed the Hajj for the first time, say as a caravan attendant, could go on Hajj as a naib for his deceased father or mother, unless he was not mustadi in the first year and has become mustadi in the next year. Ihram would be incorrect for one who, as a naib, becomes a murim at the Masjid ash-Shajara and goes to Mecca where he realizes he was personally mustadi. He should return and become a murim for his own Umrah Tamattu and perform his own religious duties. The condition of faith and belief of the naib, being a prerequisite for niyabah in Hajj, also applies to other rites in which niyabah is permissible, such as Rami and Taraf. It is incumbent on the naib to perform the rites in accordance with the decrees of his own marja taqlid. A naib who, at the time of accepting niyabah, was fully capable of representing another person at the Hajj, but who had an excuse at the time of becoming a mu'rin or even before, could continue his niyabah if his excuse does not make him violate some Hajj rites. But if his excuse makes him violate some Hajj rites, the contract for his niyabah could be declared null and void. Based on the awat, the naib and one who has hired him should make a compromise on the former's wages, and the duty of the Umrah and Hajj would be vested with the latter. Gratuitous or wage-earning niyabah is not acceptable from those hired to render services and unable to have ikhtiyari wuquf in mashar, as well as all other people who have excuses and who have performed such incomplete forms of Hajj. Their niyabah would not be acceptable as the Hajj of the persons who have hired them, and they do not deserve wages. One who cannot perform the ikhtiyari rites of the Hajj is exempt and cannot become a naib. The niyabah of a person who lacks the ability to correct his qira is null and void. If he has the ability, the niyabah of such a person is valid, provided he corrects his qira. Question 1. Suppose a person who registers his name, receipt of payment, and specifies in his will that after his demise his son should go on Hajj and perform it on behalf of him, passes away. Upon the father's death, the son obtains financial istitah, but he can only go on Hajj using his father's receipt of payment. Now, by using this receipt and arriving at Mikat, should he perform the Hajj on behalf of his father? Or would he obtain istitah and have to perform Hajj for himself? Answer: the son can go on Hajj using the receipt based on his father's will in case the will for what is additional to the Hajj Mikati does not exceed 1/3 and the heirs have allowed it. He should perform the Hajj on behalf of his father. Question 2. In the past two cases, if the son shoulders the duty of performing Hajj on behalf of his father but performs his own Hajj, would it be considered his obligatory Hajj of Islam or not? Answer: no. Question 3. A person's father who was mustadi passes away. The son takes his father's receipt and goes on Hajj with the intention of representing his father. He reaches Mikat where he himself is mustadi. What should he do? I should explain that there is no will, nor has he been asked to engage in niyabah. For instance, he was the sole heir and Hajj would not be possible for him unless in this way. Answer: in this case, he should perform his own Hajj and hire a naib for his father. Question 4. Being responsible for the Hajj caravan, I had to take care of the sick and disabled people in my group and, therefore, performed ijtirari wuquf. Please explain my religious duty. Answer: if you accompanied disabled and sick persons who had excuses not to engage in ikhtiyari wuquf, here is no problem for you. But if served as a naib for someone else, your niyabah would not be acceptable. Question 5. A person served as naib for a deceased person without having any excuses not to perform some Hajj rites at the time of being hired as naib, but several years after performing the Hajj, he realized that in the Mashar al-Haram he had engaged in ijtirari wuquf with women and sick persons for whom he was guide and went to Mina. He was unaware of the fact that the naib should engage in ikhtiyari wuquf. What duty does he shoulder? Answer: this should not have been done on a Hajj in which he was hired as naib and he does not deserve any wages. In terms of the wages, he should refer to the person who hired him. Or in case his contract for niyabah has not expired, he should once again go on Hajj as a naib and correctly perform the rites. Question 6. My late father had stated that his eldest son should go to Mecca on his behalf. I am the eldest son and have become a mustadi with the inheritance. So far, I have not been able to convert my share of the inheritance into cash. Under such conditions, can I perform the Hajj on my father's behalf or not? Answer: supposing that you have financial istitah through converting your share of the inheritance into cash, you should primarily perform your own obligatory Hajj and later on perform it on behalf of your father or hire an aid for him. Question 7. A lady for whom the Hajj was obligatory said in her last will that the executor of her will should go on Hajj on her behalf using money from what she left behind. Now the executor of her will has physical, financial, and other types of istitah, but has not registered name for Hajj based on an excuse and lacks istitah for traveling. Could the executor of the will engage in Hajj niyati? Answer: if the executor of the will did not previously have istitah, if the route is not open to him now, And if he is not mustadi, he can be hired for Hajj Niyabi. But if he can reach the Miqat without being hired, he should not perform Hajj Niyabi and should perform his own Hajj. Question 8. While hiring someone for Hajj, if the person hiring the naib is unaware that the latter has excuses and hires him, would the niyaba wages be halal for the naib? Would his Hajj Niyabi be correct and be considered the obligatory Hajj of Islam or other type of Hajj for the one who has hired him? Answer: in case he had an excuse and was hired, he does not deserve wages and it would not suffice for the Hajj Niyabi. Types of Umrah. As with Hajj, Umrah also falls into two types, obligatory and recommended. Umrah would become incumbent only once in the lifetime of one who has istitah. As with Hajj, its obligation is immediate. In its obligation, there is no requirement for having istitah for Hajj. If one were mustadi for Umrah, it would become incumbent on him to perform, even if one is not mustadi for Hajj. The opposite also holds true. If a person has istitah for Hajj but is not mustadi for Umrah, he should perform the Hajj. But for those who are away from Makkah, such as the Iranians who shoulder the duty of Hajj at Tamatu, the istitah of Hajj and the istitah of Umrah would be the same, as Hajj at Tamatu is a combination of both. This is contrary to the case of people who are in Makkah or close to it. They shoulder the duty of Hajj and Umrah mufrada, for one of which they should have istitah. Getting into the state of ihram is compulsory for anyone who wants to enter Makkah to get to the state of Umrah or Hajj. If he wants to enter Makkah sometime other than the Hajj season, he should perform Umrah mufrada. This does not apply to one for whom only a month has passed after ihram. In such a case, ihram is not necessary. Going on repeated Umrah more than once, like going on Hajj repeatedly, is mustahab. Spacing is not needed between two Umrah, but based on precaution, one can perform only one Umrah for himself every month. Each person can, however, perform an Umrah on behalf of others. Types of Hajj. The Hajj in Islam is of three types: Hajj at Tamatu, Hajj al-Quran, and Hajj al-Ifrad. Those who live over 48 miles away from Makkah should perform Hajj at Tamatu, while Hajj al-Quran and Hajj al-Ifrad are incumbent on others. Hajj al-Ifrad and Umrah mufrada. A person who cannot perform Umrah Tamatu due to shortage of time should go on Hajj al-Ifrad. With the same ihram for the Hajj at Tamatu, he can perform the Hajj al-Ifrad and go to the plain of Arafat and embark upon wuquf like other pilgrims. He should then go to Mashar and stay wuquf. Afterwards, he should go to Mina and perform the Mina rites apart from Haiti, which is not compulsory for him. He should subsequently go to Makkah, perform the tawaf, prayer, say, tawaf, and nisa, and its prayer. After this, he can dispense with ihram and return to Mina to pass the night and spend nights of Tashriq period as done by other pilgrims. In principle, therefore, Hajj al-Ifrad is similar to Hajj at Tamatu with the exception that in the latter case, a Haiti should be offered, while in the Hajj al-Ifrad, Haiti is not compulsory and is rather recommended. Umrah mufrada, which should be performed after Hajj by one whose Hajj at Tamatu has been turned into Hajj al-Ifrad, requires departing from any al-Hal. It is best to put on ihram from Jirana or Hudaybiyah or Tanim, which are closer to Makkah. Then he should go to Makkah for circumambulation around the Kaaba and recite its prayer. Embark upon say between Safa and Marwa, engage in taksir or shave his head, carry out the tawaf al-Nisa and recite tawaf prayer. Hajj at Tamatu in brief. Hajj at Tamatu includes two rites, Umrah Tamatu and Hajj at Tamatu. Umrah Tamatu has priority over Hajj. Umrah Tamatu has the following 5 acts. 1. Getting into the state of the ihram. 2. Tawaf around the Kaaba. 3. Tawaf prayer. 4. Say between Safa and Marwa. 5. Taksir. When the muhrim accomplishes these tasks, things which had become unlawful to him due to ihram become permitted. Hajj at Tamatu comprises of the following 13 acts. 1. Getting into the state of the ihram. 2. Wuquf in the plain of Arafat. 3. Wuquf in Mashar al-Haram. 4. Stoning the Jamrat al-Aqaba in Mina. 5. Offering sacrifice in Mina. 6. Shaving the head or taksir in Mina. 7. Tawaf in Makkah. 8. Reciting 2 rak'ah tawaf prayer. 9. Say between Safa and Marwa. 10. Tawaf and Nisa. 11. Reciting 2 rak'ah prayer of Tawaf and Nisa. 12. Staying in Mina on the 11th, 12th, and 13th Dhul al-Hijjah for some people 13. Rami Jamarat on the 11th, 12th of Dhul al-Hijjah. Those who remain in Mina on the night preceding the 13th should engage in Rami Jamarat on the 13th. It is permissible to perform Umrah Mufrada during the Hajj season before Umrah Tamatu. Based on precaution, one should observe a month's space between the two Umrah he undertakes for himself. If the second Umrah is performed through Niyaba, the Naib can receive wages for it. If the Umrah Mufrada were obligatory for the one who has hired the Naib, it would be sufficient. Rites of Umrah Tamatu. Chapter 1. Place of getting into the state of Ihram in Umrah Tamatu. The place of getting into the state Ihram in Umrah Tamatu, which is called Mikat, can be different based on the different places from which the pilgrims depart for Hajj. The following 5 places serve as Mikat. 1. Masjid ash-Shajara, also known as Dhul Hulaifa, is the Mikat for the people of Medina who go to Mecca. In the case of emergency, getting into the state of Iran could be postponed to reach the Mikat of the pilgrims of Asham, Syria, or places parallel to it including Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan. Ihram outside the Masjid ash-Shajara is not acceptable for the people who depart from Medina and head for Mecca. It is compulsory for them to put on Ihram inside the Masjid ash-Shajara. A person in the state of Junub or Haid can become a muhrim while passing through the Masjid ash-Shajara, but should not halt in it. The al-Akik, which has 3 points, namely al-Maslak, al-Gamra, and Dihat al-Urk, is the Mikat for those who go to Mecca from Iraq and Najd. Vari Karn al-Manazil is the Mikat for the people who go on Hajj through Taif. Thor Yalamlam, which is the name of a mountain, is the Mikat for those from Yemen. Ha Jufa is the Mikat for those who headed for Mecca through Ash-Sham. After religious proof is provided on the Mikat, that is, when 2 just witnesses testify about the place being Mikat, there is no need for investigation. In the absence of religious proof, one can ask people who are informed of these places. Whenever a pilgrim takes a route which does not pass through any of the Mawaqit, he should get into the state of Ihram at any place parallel to the said Mawaqit. When there is choice, the pilgrim should not get into the state of Ihram in Jeddah and should go to one of the 5 Mawaqit, unless he or she lacks strength. In such a case, based on precaution, the pilgrim could put on Ihram in Jeddah by making a nadr. Parallel areas refer to the case in which a person who heads for Mecca reaches a place where the Mikat is located on his right or left in a straight line, such that if he passes this area, the Mikat would stand behind him. Getting into the state of Ihram before reaching the Mikat is not permissible. If one thus puts on the Ihram, it would be incorrect, unless the pilgrim makes a nadr to get into the state of Ihram in a place before the Mikat. He should then become a muhrim in this very place. For instance, if he makes a nadr to become a muhrim in Qun, it is incumbent on him to act in accordance with his nadr. It is not permissible to voluntarily delay getting into the state of Ihram in Mikat. If due to forgetfulness, ignorance, or some other excuse, he leaves the Mikat without getting into the state of Ihram, he should, if possible, return to the Mikat and become muhrim there. If not possible to return to the Mikat, he should leave the haram, if he has entered it, and, based on Ihtiyat Wajib, get as close to the Mikat as possible and then get into the state of Ihram. If he cannot go out of the haram due to time limitation or the like, he should become a muhrim inside the haram at the very point where his excuse has been removed. If he leaves the Mikat without getting into the state of Ihram, it is wajib for him to return if time is not limited and become a muhrim in the Mikat he has passed, no matter whether another Mikat is before him or not. Miscellaneous issues related to the Mikat. While putting on the Ihram at Masjid ash-Shajara, it is incumbent to put it on inside the mosque itself and not in its vicinities. If a lady is Haid in Mikat and is confident she cannot perform Umrah Tamatu in due time, she should make niyyah for Hajj al-Ifrad and after completion perform Hajj Umrah. If a person is in Mecca and wants to perform Umrah Tamatu but has some reasons that prevent him from going to the Mikat for it, he should go outside the Haram and become a muhrim. It would suffice for Madni al-Hal. For the Iranians, whether those employed in Jeddah or others, Mikat for Umrah Tamatu and Umrah Mufrada is the prescribed Mawaqit. But for Umrah Mufrada, there could be permit for Ihram in Jeddah with nadr, yet, as a precaution, the pilgrim should get into the state of Ihram in the Mawaqit. Based on Ihtiyat, Caravan attendants who want to go to Mecca and then leave it should not perform Umrah Tamattu. To enter Mecca, they should go to one of the prescribed mawaqit and become muhrim there for Umrah Mufrada. Adni al-Hal is not the miqat for such people. After performing Umrah Mufrada, they can leave Mecca. Afterwards, entrance into Mecca for the second and third times would not require ihram. The last time such people arrive in Mecca, they should go to one of the prescribed mawaqit such as Masjid ash-Shajara or al-Jufa to become muhrim for Umrah Tamattu. Getting into the state of ihram before reaching the miqat would be correct with nadr. As a result, Haid women who have religious excuses and cannot enter the masjid can offer nadr in Madinah to become muhrim for Umrah. In this case, they do not have to go to Masjid ash-Shajara. If husbands of these women are present, they should give Eidin for their wives' nadr. Miqat in Al-Jufa is not confined to the mosque, and people can become muhrim in any part of Al-Jufa. Leaving Mecca between Umrah Tamattu and Hajj is not permissible, unless there is an emergency or exigency. In such a case, based on precaution, the muhrim should get into the state of ihram for the Hajj and then leave, unless this would cause him distress. In such a case, he can leave Mecca without ihram. At any rate, leaving Mecca would not make the Hajj incorrect. Caravan attendants and the like can enter Mecca with Umrah Mufrada and perform Umrah Tamattu when they would no longer leave Mecca unless for wukuf in the plain of Arafat. If a person has become muhrim in Jeddah and performed Umrah Tamattu, he should go to Miqat, become muhrim, and renew Umrah Tamattu if he does not have any excuse not to go to Miqat and if there is still time to perform Umrah Tamattu. If a person leaves Mecca after performing Hajj Tamattu and wants to return while still a month has not passed from the time of ihram for Umrah Tamattu, he does not need to become muhrim and can enter Mecca without ihram. One who has performed Umrah Mufrada less than a month back can pass the miqat without ihram. In the absence of her husband, a woman who wants to make a nadr to get into the state of ihram before reaching the miqat does not need his permission, but in case her husband is present, based on precaution, she should make the nadr with his permission. Otherwise, her nadr would not be valid. Pre-miqat nadr for ihram is also permissible for the naib. Question 1. A group headed for Makkah via Taif. Before reaching Qarn al-Manazil, they were sent to go through al-Aqiq. They were barred from going to Qarn al-Manazil and became muhrim in al-Aqiya. What consideration should be taken in regard to their ihram? Answer: their ihram is correct. Question 2. A Haid woman leaving Madinah for Mecca thought she could become muhrim and perform her duty while passing through Masjid ash-Shajara. But when reaching the mosque's courtyard, she realized that due to the huge crowd gathering there she could not become a muhrim by passing through. She obtained her husband's permission for nadr, went several steps away from the masjid, and became muhrim with nadr. Does this suffice or not? Answer: there is no problem as she became muhrim with nadr before reaching the miqat. Question 3. A Haid woman, conceiving she could get into the state of ihram while passing through Masjid ash-Shajara, entered the mosque, immediately got into the state of ihram, cited the talbiyah, and took several steps toward the door she wanted to use to leave the mosque. But when she saw she could not pass through, she left through the door from which she had entered. Is her ihram correct or not? Answer: it is correct. Question 4. If upon leaving the miqat and along the way the pilgrim realizes that he has not made the talbiyah or niyyah or that his ihram is incorrect due to some other reason and wants to return to the miqat and that this would not be feasible for him unless he can possibly return to the miqat via Makkah, could he go to Makkah and return to the miqat? Or should he become muhrim where he is? Answer: if he can return to the miqat, even from Makkah, he cannot become muhrim from any place other than the miqat. But to enter Makkah, he should become muhrim at Adni al-Hal, while making intention for Umrah Mufrada. After performing its rites, he should go to one of the prescribed mawaqit and get into the state of ihram for Umrah Tamattu. Chapter 2. 3 acts are obligatory at the time of getting into the state of ihram. First, niyyah. When a person wants to become muhrim for Umrah Tamattu, he should make niyyah for it. Umrah, Hajj, and their rites serve as ibadat and should be carried out with sincere niyyah for the satisfaction of Almighty Allah SWT without any intention for whatsoever that renders ihram vain and void. Second, Talbiyah. Talbiyah means saying labbaik. He should pronounce the following: Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. Yes, here I am, O Lord. Here I am. Here I am. There is no partner for you. here I am. This much would be sufficient for him to become muhrim and for his ihram to be correct. Based on Ayat Mustahab, after pronouncing the four labbaik, he should say, Inna alhamdulillah laka wal mulka, la sharika laka labbaik. Surely the praise and the bounties are for you, and the kingdom is yours. There is no partner for you, here I am. After pronouncing the above, as an additional precaution, he should say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, Inna alhamdulillah laka wal mulka, la sharika laka labbaik. Yes, here I am, O Lord, here I am. Surely the praise and the bounties are for you, and the kingdom is yours. There is no partner for you. Here I am only once. It is obligatory to recite labbaik. If one cannot learn the obligatory labbaik, or if he is short of time to learn it and cannot pronounce it even with instruction, he should pronounce it any way he can, or, based on precaution, he should hire a naib. It is obligatory to discontinue reciting the talbiyah for Umrah Tamattu upon sighting the houses of Mecca. It is also obligatory to discontinue reciting the talbiyah of Hajj by the Zawal of Arafah day. Third, ihram. Men should wear two pieces of clothing to get into the state of ihram. These are lounge, a piece of cloth worn around the waist downwards, and the reda cloak which should be worn on the shoulders. Based on Ayat, these two pieces of clothing should be worn before making the niyyah for ihram and pronouncing the labbaik. If he wears them after pronouncing the labbaik, he should repeat the pronouncement of the labbaik based on Ayat Mustahab. It is not necessary for the lounge to cover the navel and the knees. It would suffice to be conventional. While wearing the clothing for ihram, based on necessary precaution, one should make niyyah with the intention of submitting to the will of Almighty Allah SWT. It is a condition that these two pieces of clothing are such that if one prays while wearing them, his prayer would be correct. Therefore, they should not be made of silk, nor should they be stained with impurities that render prayer null and void. In addition, the lounge should not be made of thin and transparent cloth. Women's ihram cloths should not be made of pure silk. The two pieces of clothing which the muhrim should wear are exclusive to men. Women can become muhrim while wearing their usual clothes, whether stitched or not, but their clothes should not be made of pure silk, as already mentioned. If the ihram clothing were made of hide, nylon, or the like, it would create no problems, provided that it is conventionally known as clothes. The ihram clothing does not necessarily have to be made of woven fabrics. Rather, if it is made of felt and is conventionally known as clothes, it would not be a problem. If one knowingly and intentionally fails to take off his stitched clothes at the time of ihram, his ihram will not be completely correct. While getting into the state of ihram, it is not permissible to wear the lounge around the neck, but tying the lounge and the like is permissible. Secondary issues related to ihram. An insane person has no taklif, and ihram is not obligatory for him. If he enters Mecca without ihram, it would not be a problem. The Hajj rites of one who has deliberately mispronounced the talbiyah are incorrect. If talbiyah is mispronounced involuntarily or due to forgetfulness or unawareness, it might be deemed correct. In the case of a person who mispronounces the talbiyah and realizes that he has not correctly become muhrim after the wuqufain and before the completion of the Hajj rites, his Hajj might be deemed correct, provided that he comes up with this realization after the time for correction has passed. But based on the ayat, he should not suffice with such a Hajj. Chapter 3. What becomes haram to the muhrim? First, hunting wild animals, unless there is fear of their attack. Second, sex, having sexual intercourse, kissing, caressing, or amorously looking at the opposite sex. In short, any kind of carnal pleasure. If a man lustfully and sensually kisses his wife, he should give a camel as kafara. If there is no lust or sensuality, he should offer a sheep. Kissing those other than the spouse, such as one's mother or children, is not haram and does not require kafara. If there is sexual intercourse after wuquf in al-mash or al-haram and before the end of the tawaf and nisa, Hajj would be correct, but kafara should be offered. But if it is after tawaf and nisa, no kafara should be given. The fuqaha disagree on its hukam during tawaf and nisa. Whether doing half of it or passing through the fifth shot is equal to the entire tawaf. One camel should be offered as kafara for masturbation, which leads to ejaculation. Third, marriage. It is not permissible for the muhrim to contract marriage for himself or on behalf of another person, whether the latter is a muhrim or a non-muhrim yuhil. Fourth, Masturbation. Masturbation means causing ejaculation with the hands or other means. One who mistakenly or unaware of the precept masturbates does not have to pay kafara and should engage in istighfar. If he does so knowingly and deliberately, he should offer a camel as kafara. If he cannot offer the camel, he should sacrifice a sheep. If he masturbates before al-Muzdalifah, he should complete the Hajj rites and perform it over again next year. The same applies to a case in which his wife touches his genitals. Fifth, use of perfume. Use of perfume, whether it is musk, saffron, camphor, aloes wood, ambergris, in general perfume in the absolute sense of the word, is prohibited. Based on necessary precaution, one should abstain from smelling anything which has a scent, but which is not deemed perfume. Repeated use of sweet-smelling materials such that it is considered as one application does not increase the kafara, but apparently kafara should be offered for each application, even though the principle of necessity of kafara on sweet-smelling material is not prescribed. Sixth, men should not wear stitched clothes. Men should not wear stitched clothes, including shirt, underwear, long garment open in the front, vest, coat, and the like. The same applies to clothes with buttons and also woven clothes, though these might not be stitched. If a man needs the aforementioned clothes, it is permissible for him to wear them, but, based on precaution, he should offer kafara. Women are allowed to wear stitched clothes without any restrictions. It is permissible to wear wallets, belts, and other small stitched items that are not ordinarily considered as clothes. Seventh, darkening the eyelids with kohl for ornamentation, even if there is no intention for ornamentation. Based on necessary precaution, one should avoid using kohl, which might cause ornamentation. Application of kohl is for both men and women. There is no kafara for application of kohl. Eighth, looking into the mirror. There is no problem in wearing glasses without having the intention for adornment, but based on precaution, glasses should not be worn for adornment. Ninth, wearing boots. Give a light cotton shoes, socks, and the like. This applies to men only. Evidently, covering the surface of the feet from the ankle with boots, socks, and the like is forbidden. At any rate, if the muhrim has to wear such items, he should, as a precaution, tear the surface area. There is no kafara for whatsoever covers the surface of the feet. 10th, fusuq. Fusuq does not merely apply to lying. It also covers cursing and boasting. Fusuq is forbidden even if it does not involve insulting and cursing others. 11th, jidal. Jidal, which means saying such words as yes, by Allah, or no, by Allah. Pronouncing the words no and yes to indicate negative and affirmative context is not related to jidal. Jidal means swearing to prove or disprove something. 12th, killing insects that appear on one's body such as louse, flea, and leech. 13th, wearing rings for adornment. Wearing rings for adornment. There is, however, no problem in wearing rings for istihbab. There is no problem in wearing rings for a special purpose other than adornment and istihbab. It is forbidden for the muhrim to dye his body with henna for adornment. As a necessary precaution, henna should not be used for adornment, even if there is no intention to this effect. There is no kafara for wearing rings and dyeing the body with henna. 14th, women's use of ornaments. As necessary precaution, ornaments should not be used for adornment, even if there is no intention to this effect. Ornaments that women habitually wear before ihram should not be taken off to get into the state of ihram. Women should not show to men, even to their husbands, ornaments that they habitually wear. Using ornaments is but does not involve kafara. 15th, applying oil to the body and ointment. Application of oil to the body members and the hair for ornamentation and softness is not permissible, even if the oil has no perfume. There is no kafara for application of perfume-free oil. There is no kafara for application of perfumed oil, but based on the ought, a sheep should be offered as kafara. 16th, removing hair. Removing hair from the body of oneself or from that of another person, whether he is a muhrim or a muhil. If apart from the time of wudhu and ghusl, one touches his head or face and hair falls out, he should, as a precaution, offer a handful of wheat, flour, or the like, even though the necessity of this ayat is not prescribed. 17th, men should not cover their heads with anything. As a precaution, men should offer a sheep as sacrifice for covering the head. Covering parts of the head does not involve the hukam for the entire head, unless it conventionally signifies this. For instance, such as wearing a small hat that covers only the middle part of the head. As a precaution, Kafara should be offered each time the head is covered. It is not permissible to immerse the entire head into water. The impermissibility of this act as regards some parts of the head has not been prescribed. Based on precaution, a sheep should be offered as kafara for immersing the entire head into water. There is no problem in drying the head with towels and the like, unless the towel covers the entire head. There's no problem in wearing a handkerchief around the head to relieve headache. 18th, women covering their faces. Women should not cover their faces with small black veils or any other such items. It is forbidden for women to cover the face as they habitually do to observe the hijab, but covering parts of the top or bottom or the sides of the face during prayer and on other occasions would bear no problem, provided that it does not signify covering the whole face. There is no kafara for using small black veils on the face, no matter how these are used. 19th, it is not permissible for the muhrim man to shade himself. Men are not allowed to shade themselves, but for women and child it is permissible and involves no kafara. Passing under a shade is forbidden when one is moving from a place, but when one resides in a place such as Mina or else where there is no problem in moving under the shade, nor is there any problem in using an umbrella or the like to be under shade, even if one is walking. Therefore, the muhrim can use an umbrella to go from his tent in Mina to the place where sacrifices are offered or where Rami al-Jamarat is carried out. It is not permissible for the muhrim to be under shade while traveling in any vehicle, airplane, or ship which has a roof. There is, however, no problem in passing through or under fixed shades such as bridges and tunnels. While moving from a place, the muhrim can use the shade of the side of the mount, the wall, or the car, but, based on precaution, he should abstain from it. Sitting under the roof while moving from a place at night is contrary to precaution, even though it might be permissible. The muhrim can sit in a roofed car or aeroplane that transports him at night, but he should observe the ihtiyat on rainy and cold nights, unless this ihtiyat causes him distress. Those who board a ship in the state of ihram should not remain under its root, but sitting next to the ship's wall, which provides shade, is obviously permissible, though, based on ihtiyat mustahab, this should be avoided. A sheep should be offered as kafara for going under the shade while moving or traveling from a place. Those who become muhrim for Hajj in the Masjid al-Haram and have taken residence in Mecca till the day of Arafah can use shade, so long as they are not going outside Mecca. Using the shade involves no problem for one who has become muhrim in Tanim, since it has become part of Mecca, which in turn has the status of residence. 20th, causing blood to gush out from the body. There is no kafara for causing blood to gush out from the body, although as a precaution, one sheep should be offered as sacrifice. During ihram, it is impermissible to scrape the skin, brush the teeth, or do anything else that causes bleeding. But drawing blood out of body of others does not have the same hukam. 21st, clipping the nails. If a person clips all nails of his hands and less than 10 nails of his feet, he should offer 1 sheep for nails of his hands and 1 mud food for each nail of his feet. If he clips all nails on his feet and clips less than 10 nails on his hands, he should offer a sheep for the nails of his feet and 1 mud food for each nail of his hand. 22nd, pulling out a tooth without bleeding is not forbidden, nor does it require kafara. In case pulling out the tooth is imperative and causes bleeding, a sheep should be offered as kafara based on ihtiyat mustahab. 23rd, cutting a tree or plant that has grown in the haram. 24th, carrying arms. Miscellaneous issues related to restrictions of ihram. Going under the shade is haram while one is in the state of ihram, but if the vehicle of the muhrim passes under bridges along the way or remains under a roof at the gas station, there would be no problem for the muhrim, and he does not have to pay kafara. There is no problem in having injections while in the state of ihram, but injections which cause bleeding should be avoided unless there is dire necessity for them. In this case, no kafara would be required. After the muhrim reaches Mecca, even those new districts that are away from the Masjid al-Haram, he could use roofed vehicles or shades to go to the Masjid al-Haram. As a necessary precaution, perfume, soaps, and shampoos should be avoided. There is no problem in using perfume-free soaps and shampoos. Question 1. Due to heat rash, some muhrims need ointments. Could a muhrim use such ointments or not? Answer: no, unless there is exigency for it. But use of ointment, even if not exigent, does require kafara, unless it is perfumed. In this case, Based on Ayatullah, he should offer a sheep as kafara. Question 2. Does shading oneself refer to bringing the head under the shade only, or does it also apply to the shoulders? Answer: it does not apply to the shoulders. Question 3. Does shading oneself only apply to going under the roof, or does it also signify shades of cars? Answer: it does not signify the latter, even though, based on Ayat Mustahab, it should be avoided. Question 4. Could one use an umbrella in Arafat as with Mina, or does Arafat involves a hukam different from that of Mina? Answer: there is no problem in using an umbrella in Arafat. Question 5. Along the way from Makkah to Arafat and Mina, could the muhrim pass through tunnels knowing that there is no other route that has no tunnels? Answer: there is no problem in it. Chapter 4. Obligatory tawaf and some of its ahkam. The first rite of the Umrah, which is obligatory for one who becomes a muhrim for Umrah Tamatu and enters the Holy Makkah, is to engage in tawaf around the Kaaba for Umrah Tamatu. Tawaf means circumambulating the Kaaba 7 times, as will be explained later. Each turn is called shot. Tawaf then comprises of 7 ashwat. Tawaf is rukan of Umrah. An Umrah would be vain and void for whoever deliberately abstains from tawaf until its time is over, whether this is done knowingly or unknowingly. One who makes his Umrah void without any excuse and who has no time for provisions should, based on the Awat, perform Hajj al-Ifrad, after which he would embark upon the Umrah and leave the Hajj for the coming year. In case the muhrim wants to perform a tawaf with the other rites of Umrah but would not be able to have ikhtiyari wuquf in Arafat, he would be regarded as being short of time for the tawaf. If he mistakenly avoids tawaf, he should perform the tawaf and its prayer at any time. If he has returned to his place and cannot return to Makkah, or if such a return is difficult, he should hire a trustworthy name. On obligations of tawaf. First, prerequisites of the tawaf. One should be pure of hadath akbar and hadath asgar. One should be pure of hadath akbar such as janaba, haid, and nifas, and hadath asgar, i.e. he should have wudhu after passing the gases or after coming from toilet. Tawaf of a person with hadath akbar or asgar is null and void, whether willful or due to negligence, forgetfulness, or unawareness. If hadath asgar occurs during tawaf after the completion of the 4th round, he should stop and gain tahara. Afterwards, he should start from where he left off and complete the tawaf. If the hadath occurs before completing half of the 4th round, it is wajib to stop, gain tahara, and then complete it. Likewise, if hadath asgar occurs before half the 4th round, namely before completing the 4th round, he should stop, gain tahara, and then complete it as fil dema. Tahara from hadath akbar and asgar is not a precondition for a recommended tawaf. If during tawaf, hadath akbar such as janaba or haid occurs, the pilgrim should immediately leave the Masjid al-Haram. If this happens before half of the 4th round, he should complete it after ghusl. If it happens after half of the 4th round, he should again complete it after ghusl as fil dema. If during the obligatory tawaf, the pilgrim has an excuse not to engage in wudhu or ghusl, it is obligatory to perform tayammum and then embark upon the tawaf. If during the tawaf he doubts whether he has performed the wudhu or the ghusl, he should disregard his doubt if he has already had tahara. Otherwise, he should engage in tahara and complete the tawaf. The tahara of the body and the clothes from nijasa or impurities. If during tawaf, the pilgrim's body or clothes become najis in such a way that purification is impossible while performing the tawaf, he should stop, purify the clothes or the body, immediately return, and complete the tawaf from where he left off. His tawaf would be correct. Apparently, the previous hukum also applies to a case in which he realizes that his body or clothes have become najis during tawaf and supposes that nijasa has occurred during tawaf. If he forgets about the nijasa in his body or clothes and performs the tawaf but remembers it during the tawaf or afterwards, he should, based on Ayat Wajib, perform tawaf all over again. The type of bleeding that is excusable during prayer is not excused in tawaf. Tahara is not requisite for items such as socks, skullcaps, handkerchiefs, and rings. Covering naked parts of the body based on necessary precaution. Covering naked parts of the body is a precondition of tawaf. Circumcision. Circumcision is a prerequisite for men's tawaf to be correct. This hukam applies to both the mature and the immature males. Second, essential elements of tawaf are 7 in number, commencing at the Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone of the Kaaba. While commencing at the Hajar al-Aswad, all parts of the pilgrim's body do not have to face all parts of the Hajar al-Aswad. It is obligatory to start from any part of the Hajar al-Aswad and end where he started. For the sake of certainty, he can make the niyyah a little before the Hajar al-Aswad and start the tawaf while reaching its parallel areas and end where he started. It is obligatory to start and end the tawaf at the Hajar al-Aswad in the commonly understood sense, whether at the beginning, the middle, or the end of it. The 7th round should be completed at the point where one started the tawaf. As a result, if he started the tawaf at the beginning of the Hajar al-Aswad, he should end it at the same place. Likewise, if he started at the middle or the end, he should complete the tawaf at the same place. As with all Muslims, the pilgrim should start the tawaf at the parallel areas of the Hajar al-Aswad without meticulousness shown by those having scruples. The 7 rounds should be completed without any halt, ending each round at the Hajar al-Aswad. This can be done through completing the 7 rounds without any halt. The 7th round should end at the same point where the pilgrim started the tawaf. It is not necessary to halt after each round and then commence a new round. The Kaaba should be on his left during tawaf. The hair Ismail must be included in tawaf. The hair Ismail must be included in tawaf. Hair Ismail is linked to the Kaaba, and the pilgrim should circumambulate it. If he does not circumambulate the hair Ismail and passes between it on all rounds, his tawaf will be null and void and should be performed all over again. If in some rounds he does not circumambulate the hair Ismail, it is obligatory to repeat the relevant rounds. If this is not done and he continues the tawaf will be vain and void and must be performed all over again. But tawaf should be performed between the Kaaba and Maqam Ibrahim. It is held that tawaf should be performed between the Kaaba and the rock called Maqam Ibrahim, station of Abraham, on all sides. But based on the Aqwa, there is no obligation in this act. There is no limitation for madaf. Tawaf is permissible up to any part of the Masjid al-Haram in which tawaf would be regarded as the tawaf of Kaaba. If there is no crowd and exigency, it is must-have to perform tawaf between Kaaba and Maqam Ibrahim. Covering the Kaaba and whatever is part of it. There is a projected part called Shadrawan around the walls of the Kaaba. Shadrawan is part of the Kaaba and should be included in the tawaf. It is permissible to place the hand on the wall of the Kaaba at the Shadrawan, and this act will not invalidate the tawaf. It is permissible to place the hand on the wall of Hair Ismail during tawaf, and this act will not render the tawaf null and void. The tawaf should consist of 7 rounds, no more, no less. If upon returning to his country, the pilgrim realizes that his tawaf has been incompletely performed, he must return and correctly perform the tawaf and its prayers. If he cannot return, he should hire a naib. If during tawaf, he faces Hadaf before reaching half the 4th shot, namely reaching the parallel of the Kaaba's 3rd pillar, he should dispense with the tawaf, perform wudhu, and start the tawaf all over again. If the hadath appears between half the 4th shot and the end of this round, he should dispense with the tawaf, perform wudhu, and then engage in a complete tawaf as mafil dima. If the hadath occurs after the completion of the 4th shot, he should stop the tawaf, perform wudhu, and then carry out 3 other ashwat. If he faces hadath akbar during tawaf, he should immediately leave the Masjid al-Haram and perform ghusl. If the hadath akbar happens before completing half of the 4th shot, his tawaf will be vain and void and should be performed anew. If hadath akbar occurs after completing half of the 4th shot, he should perform a complete tawaf as mafil dima. If he mistakenly, negligently, or unknowingly performs the tawaf without wudhu, his tawaf will be invalidated. The same applies to engaging in tawaf while in the states of janaba, haid, and nifas. If due to illness or brevity of time, a muhrim cannot perform the tawaf, he should be assisted and taken by others for tawaf. If this is not possible either, he should hire a naib. Based on necessary precaution, muwalat should be observed during the tawaf. This does not apply to halting the tawaf after completing half of its rites to perform prayer and the like. If during the obligatory tawaf, he halts for daily prayer after having completed at least half of the required rounds, namely 3.5 ashwat. He should continue the tawaf from where he left off. If he have completed less than 3.5 ashwat, based on ayat, he should perform the tawaf all over again if the time gap is long. But if the time interval is not long, this ayat might not be wajib and is mustasan. In the relevant ahkam, there is no difference between congregation or individual prayers or abundance or brevity of time. Secondary issues related to the tawaf. If upon completion of Hajj the muhrim realizes that he have passed through the Hayr Ismail during several of the ashwat on tawaf of Umrah or Hajj, his Hajj will be correct, and he should only perform tawaf and its prayer all over again. If after taksir and Umrah he realizes that his wudu was null and void or was not performed and that he has, nonetheless, engaged in tawaf and its prayer, he should perform tawaf and its prayer anew, and thus his Umrah will be correct. There is no problem in halting the tawaf, but based on ayat mustahab, the obligatory tawaf should not be halted in such a way as to disrupt its mu'alat. One who is to perform jabr or wudu and tayammum, but who has ignorantly completed Umrah rites without tayammum should perform tawaf and its prayer all over again. If a woman's hair or parts of body, which should be covered during tawaf, are deliberately uncovered, her tawaf will be correct, but she has committed a sin. It is permissible to perform the tawaf in the upper floor, which would be parallel to the ceiling of the Kaaba, but based on ayat, this should be dispensed with. Chapter 5. The Tawaf Prayer. Upon completion of the Umrah Tawaf, it is obligatory to recite 2 rak'ah of prayers similar to the morning prayer. Based on the the prayer should be performed immediately after tawaf. It is obligatory to perform this prayer at Maqam Ibrahim. It is wajib to offer this prayer behind the Maqam such that the Maqam would stand between him and the Kaaba. He should stand as close to the Maqam as possible, provided that he does not disturb others. If due to overcrowding he cannot stand behind Maqam Ibrahim, he should stand at any point that would be considered as the Maqam's back, even if it were far away. Possibly then the prayer would be correct in any part of the Masjid al-Haram. If he forgets to perform the obligatory prayer of the Tawaf, he should offer it at the Maqam Ibrahim's back whenever he remembers it. If he forgets to perform the Tawaf prayer and realizes this while engaged in say between Safa and Marwa, he should stop the say at that very point, return, offer 2 rak'ah of prayer, and then complete the say from where he left off. The person who has forgotten to perform the tawaf prayer should return to the Masjid al-Haram if he has not gone far away from Makkah, and if he does not face any problems in returning to the Masjid al-Haram, then he should offer his prayer. If he has gone far away from Makkah and if returning to the Masjid al-Haram causes him trouble, he should offer his prayer wherever he realizes that he has not already performed it. The same prayer precepts mentioned for forgetfulness apply to those ignorant of the rites of tawaf prayer. Tawaf prayer should be performed behind the Maqam Ibrahim and not on both sides of it. Deliberate abandoning tawaf prayer invalidates the Hajj. Question 1. Is it possible to perform other must-have prayer or acts of worship between tawaf and its prayer? What about congregation prayer? Answer: it is obligatory to perform tawaf and its prayer consecutively, but an interval is to be taken as commonly understood, such as the interval for nafila prayers after offering the daily prayers. Question 2. Could one perform the obligatory prayer of the tawaf simultaneous with the daily congregation prayer? Answer: the legitimacy of reciting the tawaf prayer in congregation has not been prescribed. Question 3. Can Gairul Maram men and women stand behind Maqam Ibrahim to perform the tawaf prayer? Answer: there is no problem if there is one wajib space between them, or if the men stand a little ahead of the women. Chapter 6. Say in some of its ahkam. After performing the tawaf prayer, the muhrim should embark upon say between the 2 famous hills of Safa and Marwa. Say refers to beginning at Safa going towards Marwa and returning again to Safa. The say between Safa and Marwa should be performed 7 times, each of which is called shot. That is to say, going from Safa to Marwa is 1 shot, while returning from Marwa to Safa is another. It is obligatory to begin the say at Safa and end the 7th shot at Marwa. It is obligatory to perform the say after tawaf and its prayer. If the distance between Safa and Marwa is made into 2 or several layers or strata, all of which are between the two hills. The pilgrim can engage in say from each layer or stratum. It is obligatory to turn the face toward Marwa while going and to turn the face toward Safa while returning. Say can be delayed after tawaf and its prayer to rest or proceed when the weather gets cool. Say can be delayed until the night without any excuse. Say cannot be delayed until next day, unless there is a valid excuse. Say is an act of worship and should be performed with pure niyyah for the satisfaction of Almighty Allah SWT. If due to the forgetfulness of Hajj, pilgrim increases the number of ashwat of the say by 1 shot or more, his say is valid. If he mistakenly performs less ashwat than required, he has to complete it whenever he recalls his mistake. In case he has gone to his homeland, he should return and perform it, if this does not cause him distress. If he cannot return, or if returning involves distress, he should hire a naib. If he forgets to perform the say in Umrah Tamatu, conceives that his Umrah rites have been completed, removes ihram, and then has intercourse with his wife, he should return and complete the say. Based on necessary precaution, he should offer a cow as kafara. Secondary issues related to the say. In case the pilgrim knows he should perform the say between Safa and Marwa 7 times and begins from Safa with this intention, but regards each instance of going and returning as 1 shot, consequently performing 14 ashwat, his say is acceptable, based on the aqwa. If while performing the say he doubts the number of the shot, but continues the say and then comes to certainty and completes it, his say will be correct. Paid women who hire a naib for tawaf should personally perform the say. As the site of the say is not a mosque, they should also observe the order of tawaf and say. The precept for mistakenly increasing the number of ashwat in say also applies to unknowingly performing more ashwat than required in say. Question 1. A person was performing say. Suddenly he realized that the section marked for harwala had been passed at normal speed. He conceived that harwala was imperative and thus returned and assumed harwala to go through those parts he had passed at normal speed. Is his say correct? Answer: this should not be done with ikhtiyari, but in the aforementioned case, his say is correct, and he shoulders no obligation. Nevertheless, based on precaution, he should complete the say. Question 2. A person performs say between Safa and Marwa 5 times, comprising a total of 10 ashwat. When he realized what he had done, he stopped his say right there and then. He subsequently performed taksir. Is his say correct or not? Answer: his say is correct. Question 3. While engaged in say, pilgrim doubts the number of the ashwat, but nevertheless continues his say, trying to record the ashwat. After pondering and engaging in say for 100 meters or proceeding with the next shot, he gains certitude about the number of the shot. He completes the rest of the say with certitude. Is his say correct or not? Answer: yes, his say is correct and valid. Chapter 7. Taksir. Taksir becomes wajib upon completion of say. Taksir refers to clipping the nails or shortening the hair, mustachio, or beard. Shaving the hair on the head is forbidden and not required in taksir. Taksir is also an act of worship and should thus be performed with pure niyyah for the satisfaction of Almighty Allah SWT. If a pilgrim forgets to perform taksir until he gets into the state of ihram for Hajj, his umrah will be correct. It is must-have for him to offer a sheep as sacrifice. Based on the ayat, he should not abstain from offering this sacrifice. If he intentionally or unknowingly abstains from taksir until the time of getting into the state of ihram for Hajj, his umrah will be null and void based on the aqwa. His Hajj will become the Hajj al-Ifrad. Based on necessary precaution, he should perform Umrah Mufrad after completing the Hajj al-Ifrad and carry out the Hajj the following year. Tawaf Nisa is not wajib in Umrah Tamatu, but based on precaution, Tawaf and its prayer should be performed. After the Muhrim engages in taksir, everything which had become forbidden to him due to ihram becomes halal, even intercourse with his wife. The only exception is shaving the head, which remains haram. Secondary issues related to taksir. Pulling out the hair is not sufficient for taksir. Rather, the hair should be shortened with whatever instrument. In Umrah Tamatu, halq could not be substituted for taksir. If halq is knowingly and intentionally substituted for taksir, it would be a haram act, and a sheep should be offered as sacrifice. Question 1. A person performed Umrah Tamatu but instead of taksir pulled out some hair. being certain that this would suffice. He has now completed the Hajj. Is pulling out the hair permissible? What should this person do? Answer: pulling out the hair cannot substitute for taksir. If it is done knowingly and intentionally, kafara should be given. But if it is done unknowingly, it invalidates the Umrah, turning the person's Hajj into Hajj al-Ifrad. If Hajj was obligatory for this person, he should, based on necessary precaution, perform Umrah Mufrada after the Hajj rites. He should embark upon Umrah Tamatu and Hajj the following year. Ahkam related to Umrah and Hajj at Tamatu. Based on necessary precaution, Umrah Mufrada should not be performed after Umrah Tamatu and before Hajj at Tamatu, but it would bear no problem for Umrah and Hajj at Tamatu. The pilgrim is not allowed to leave the holy Makkah after Umrah Tamatu and before completion of the Hajj, unless there is an exigency. In this case, based on precaution, he should first become Muhrim for Hajj and then leave Makkah. But if becoming Muhrim causes him distress, he can leave without getting into the state of ihram. People such as caravan attendants who have to enter and leave Makkah several times should perform Umrah Mufrada the first time they arrive in Makkah. They should perform Umrah Tamatu the last time they enter Makkah and go to Arafat to perform Hajj and Wuquf after Umrah. The impermissibility of leaving Makkah between Umrah and Hajj applies to the precincts of the present-day Makkah. As a result, the pilgrim can go to any area that is presently part of the Makkah, though it was previously considered as being outside Makkah, turning Hajj at Tamatu into Hajj al-Ifrad. If for no good reason and intentionally he has not got into the state of ihram and invalidated his Umrah, he should, if time is short for Umrah Tamatu, perform the Hajj al-Ifrad based on necessary precaution. Then he should engage in Umrah Mufrada and carry out the Hajj the following year. A person who becomes Muhrim for Tamatu in the obligatory Hajj but who deliberately delays it until he runs out of time should act in accordance with the precept put forward in item above. Rites of Hajj at Tamatu. Chapter 1. Ihram of Hajj at Tamatu. Upon completion of Umrah, it is obligatory for the mukallaf to get into the state of ihram for Hajj at Tamatu. If he makes niyyah for Hajj at Tamatu and pronounces the wajud labaiks as already mentioned in the part on ihram for Umrah, he would become a muhrim and does not need to make the intention for ihram and for abstaining from the muhramat. He should not make the intention of doing anything that would invalidate the ihram. Niyyah should be pure and sincere to satisfy Almighty Allah SWT. Hypocrisy would invalidate the Hajj at Tamatu. Getting into the state of ihram and pronouncing labbaik is the same as mentioned in regard to ihram for Umrah. Everything presented as muhramat for ihram is also hiram in the ihram for Hajj at Tamatu. Likewise, all which required kafara there would also need kafara in the Hajj at Tamatu. Time is ample for ihram. The pilgrim can delay it so long as he still has time for ikhtiyari wuquf in Arafah after ihram. He cannot delay it further. Ihram for Hajj should be done in any part of Makkah, even in the newly built districts. Nevertheless, ihram in the Masjid al-Haram is afkal. The same precept, which applies to one who has not got into the state of ihram due to forgetfulness, applies to the person who fails to have ihram due to unawareness. Hajj will be invalidated if a person knowingly and intentionally postpones ihram until the time for wuquf in Arafat and Mashar is over. Question 1. The distance between some newly built districts of Makkah and the Masjid al-Haram is more than 18 kilometers. These might conventionally be deemed as suburbs of Makkah, not as parts of it, since traffic signs indicate the direction of Makkah. Is it then possible to become muhrim for Hajj at the aforementioned districts? Answer: there is no problem if they are the districts of Makkah, but if they are not Makkah's districts or if there is doubt about this, the pilgrim should avoid becoming a muhrim at these sites. Chapter 2. Wuquf in Arafat. Wuquf is obligatory in Arafat, which is a famous place with commonly known bounds with pure intention, as is the case of other acts of worship. Based on the ayat, wuquf in Arafat should commence at the zawal until Maghrib. The pilgrim might be allowed delay from the zawal to recite the Zuhr and Asr prayers and make the preliminaries. It is obligatory to be in Arafat from midday until sunset on the same day. But as already indicated, this is not entirely reckoned to invalidate the Hajj if abandoned. Therefore, if the pilgrim engages in a brief wuquf, the parts, and returns in the afternoon for wuquf, his Hajj will be correct, even if he deliberately and knowingly abstains from wuquf. Mere presence in Arafat is the rukn for wuquf. This presence might be very brief, such as 1 minute or 2. Therefore, if one does not at all go to Arafat, he has abstained from a rukn. If one intentionally and knowingly dispenses with the rukni wuquf, namely if he does not have any presence in Arafat from midday until sunset, his Hajj will be invalidated. If he deliberately departs from Arafat before sunset and leaves its precincts, he has committed a haram act. If he becomes repentant, returns, and engages in wuquf until sunset, he will not have to embark upon compensation. If, however, he does not return, he should offer a camel as kafara to be sacrificed in the way of Almighty Allah SWT at any place. Based on Mustahab recommended precaution, he should sacrifice the camel in Mina and on the day of Eid al-Quban, and his Hajj will be correct. If this is beyond his means, he should fast for 18 days. If he mistakenly leaves Arafat, he should return before the time expires. If he realizes his mistake but does not return, he will be a sinner, yet he does not have to pay kafara. If he does not realize his mistake until the time expires, he does not have to offer kafara. The same decree applies who leaves Arafat due to ignorance. Realization of the obligatory stay wajib wuquf and not the rukni wuquf is the standard to measure the time for wuquf in Arafat, which converts the Hajj. Chapter 3. Wuquf in Mashar al-Haram. After completing wuquf in Arafat when the sun sets on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, the pilgrim should go to Mashar al-Haram, which is a well-known place with specific limits. After leaving Arafat, based on precaution, he should spend the night preceding the Eid al-Quban until daybreak of the Eid in the Mashar al-Haram with the intention of submitting to the will of Almighty Allah SWT in spending the night there. In the morning of Eid al-Quban, he should make niyyah for wuquf in the Mashar al-Haram until sunrise. This is the extent of wajib wuquf. As this wuquf is an act of worship for Almighty Allah SWT, it should be based on sincere niyyah without engaging in hypocrisy and show-off. Those having excuses, such as women, children, the ailing people, old men, the physically weak, and those who need nurses and guides, can leave the Mashar al-Haram for Mina after some halt in the Mashar at night. Chapter 4. Wajibat of Mina. Obligations of Mina. First, Rami of Jamarat al-Aqaba. Rami of Jamarat al-Aqaba refers to throwing pebbles at the symbolic satans that are located in Mina. The pilgrim should use pebbles for Rami. These should not be very small, such as gravel, nor should they be very large. The pebbles should be of stone, not of other material like clod, potsherd, and gems. However, different types of stones, even marble, can be used. The pebbles should belong to the Mashar al-Haram, and those outside the Mashar are not acceptable. The pebbles must be new. That is to say, they should not have been used for Rami in the past years. The pebbles must be mubah. Therefore, usurped pebbles or those procured by others for personal use are not sufficient. Rami should be done from sunrise until sunset of the day of Eid al-Quban. If the pilgrim forgets to perform the Rami on this day, he can carry it out until the 13th. If he cannot carry it out by then, he should, based on necessary precaution, carry it out in person or through deputation. The following year, he or his naib should perform its kata. Several things are obligatory in Rami. Niyyah, which should be sincere without hypocrisy or show-off, both of which invalidate the Rami. The pebbles should be thrown. Going close to the jamera and placing the pebbles on it would not be sufficient. The pebbles being thrown should hit the jamera. Each Rami must be carried out using 7 pebbles. The pebbles should be gradually and consecutively thrown. In this case, there would be no problem if they hit the jamera at the same time. But all or a few of the pebbles should not be thrown at the same time, even if they consecutively rather than simultaneously hit the jamera. If the pilgrim throws a pebble but does not hit the jamera, he should throw it anew, even though at the time of Rami he conceived that the pebbles had hit the jamera. Therefore, if there are other things installed close to the jamera and he has mistakenly thrown the pebbles at them, the Rami should be repeated, even if next year and by the pilgrim's naib. Those who have excuses not to engage in Rami during the day can perform it any time at night. Second, Dihib is obligatory in Mina. One who performs the Hajj at Tamatu should offer a hadi, i.e. a camel or a cow or a sheep for Dihib. Camel is preferable. Apart from the aforementioned 3 animals, Other animals do not meet the requirements of dhib. Several points apply to the Hadi. It should be free of any defect. It should have all bodily organs. Its inner horn should not be broken. It should not be thin. It should not be castrated. It is not a condition for the Hadi to have unmutilated testicles, unless it reaches the point of castration. All bodily organs, such as testicles and ears or horns and tail that are natural to the relevant animals, should be found in the Hadi. Otherwise, it would be regarded as defective. The Hadi does not have to be young. If the Hadi is a camel, it should have entered its 6th year. If the Hadi is a cow, based on necessary precaution, it should have entered its 3rd year. The same applies to a goat, based on necessary precaution, and you should have entered its 2nd year. Dhib should be per after Rami Jamera, based on necessary precaution. Dhib of Hadi should be performed on the day of Eid al-Quban and not afterwards. If due to an excuse, such as forgetfulness or others, he forgets to perform the dhib on the day of Eid al-Quban, he should, based on necessary precaution, engage in dhib during the tashriq period. If not possible, dhib should be carried out in the remaining days of the month of Dhul-Hijjah. If the pilgrim engages in dhib of a Hadi which he conceives to be sound and healthy and later realizes that it was sick or names defective or having some bodily deficiencies, his dhib will not suffice and he hath to do it all over again if he can afford it. Based on necessary precaution, the naib for dhib should be a Shiite, unless the pilgrim himself makes the niyyah for dhib and hires a naib only to perform the dhib. Dhib is also an act of worship and entails pure niyyah to submit to the will of Almighty Allah. SWT. Secondary issues related to the Hadi. It is not permissible to deliberately delay the dhib until after the day of Eid al-Quban, unless there is an awat. But if the pilgrim intentionally, unknowingly, or mistakenly delays it, he should offer the dhib during the tashriq period. Based on precaution, the person who has accepted the niyabah of the mukallaf should personally conduct the dhib. Under the present conditions, offering the sacrifice at the new places for slaughter is correct and permissible. If a man offers the dhib on behalf of his wife or another person without having their wakala and supposing to have implicit permission from them, the dhib will not be correct. Based on necessary precaution, he should not suffice with the dhib of the naib if prior permission has not been obtained from the one who hired the naib. Iron and stainless steel knives should be used for dhib. If the pilgrim doubts whether the knife or other instruments are made of iron or not, he should come to a certainty and then perform the dhib. Question 1. What duty is shouldered by a person who has given his sheep to a non-believer for dhib and who has performed halq and other subsequent rites and then realized that a non-believer has conducted dhib for him? Answer: there is no need to perform dhib all over again if the naib is hired for the mere practice of dhib. But if the naib had niyabah for both the practice of the dhib and the niyyah for dhib, it should be performed all over again. Then halq and other subsequent rites will be correct. Question 2. What happens if a person mistakenly, unintentionally, or unknowingly fails to observe the specific order of the rites of the day of Eid al-Quban? Answer: it is obligatory to observe the specified order of the meaner rites. This order cannot be intentionally abandoned. If, however, one had not followed the order, obviously it is not obligatory for him to repeat the rites he had performed without observing order, but order should be observed based on precaution. Question 3. What should be done if after dhib and before or after completing the remaining Hajj rites, the pilgrim realizes that the age of the Hadi was less than required? Answer: he should offer dhib anew. Third, taksir is obligatory in Mina. After dhib, each mukallaf had the choice to either shave his head or shorten his nail or hair. Women should cut some locks of their hair or clip nails and should not shave their heads. Based on the awat, women should both clip their nails and cut some locks of their hair. One who has gone on Hajj for the first time has the choice to either shave his head or perform taksir. But based on the awat, complete shaving of the head halq should be carried out. Shaving the head and taksir, being acts of worship, should be carried out with pure intention to submit to the will of Almighty Allah. SWT. They would not be correct without pure intention, and in such a case they would not make halal permissible things which normally become halal after such acts. Shaving the head and taksir should be carried out in Mina, and it's not permissible to voluntarily perform them elsewhere. Based on precaution, the head should be shaved and taksir should be performed on the day of the Eid, even though the pilgrim might be allowed to delay them until the end of the Tashriq period. In Mina, it is obligatory to primarily engage in Rami Jamara, then Dihib, and then Taksir or Halq. If the pilgrim does not observe the required order of the Hajj rites, he has committed a sin. But obviously, he does not have to repeat those rites whose orders he has not observed, though the repetition would be in accordance with Ayatullah. Secondary issues related to Halq or Taksir in Hajj. Based on necessary precaution, Halq or Taksir should not be postponed until the night. If the pilgrim fails or forgets to perform them on the day of the Eid, he should carry them out on the night of the 11th of Dhul Hijjah, and this would suffice. One who wants to shave the head of another person cannot do so before he performs his own Halq or Taksir. Removing the hair of another person is not permissible until one obtains relief from ihram. One who has conducted Halq in a place other than Mina and performed the subsequent rites has not become a muhil and should perform the subsequent rites all over again. One who has, for some reason, postponed Dhib after the Eid does not have to delay Halq or Taksir. Based on precaution, Halq and Taksir should be performed on the day of the Eid, but the Tawaf al-Hajj would be invalid if performed before Halq or Taksir. Question 1. Would rites of Makkah be correct for those who came to Makkah after performing Halq and Taksir, carried out Makkah rites such as Tawaf, say, and Tawaf and Nisa, and then realized that their Halq and Taksir was not carried out in Mina? Answer: in such a case, their Makkah rites are incorrect and should be performed all over again. Chapter 5. The obligations after the rites of Mina. Rites that is obligatory to be performed in Makkah. Tawaf al-Hajj, known as Tawaf. Tawaf prayer. Say between Safa and Marwa. Tawaf and Nisa. Prayer of Tawaf and Nisa. The Tawaf al-Hajj, its prayer, say, Tawaf and Nisa, and its prayer should he performed exactly as already indicated in the part of Tawaf al-Umrah and its prayer and say. Only the niyyah would be different here. The pilgrim has to make niyyah for Tawaf al-Hajj, its say, and Tawaf and Nisa. If Mina rites were performed in advance due to excuses, they would suffice, unless the excuses become invalid later. For instance, a woman who thought her monthly period would start does not become Haid, a sick person recovers, and overcrowding is not as such to cause annoyance. Thus in such cases, it is not exigent to perform the rites all over again, but performing them all over again is in accordance with the Awat. A separate Tawaf and Nisa is obligatory for Hajj and for Umrah Mufrada. Question 1. A person has forgotten to perform Tawaf and Nisa for Umrah Mufrada and has become Muhrim for Umrah Tamattu. Should he perform the forgotten Tawaf and Nisa before or after Umrah Tamattu rites? Answer: he can perform it after the Tamattu rites. If Tawaf and Nisa is delayed, it would bear adverse impacts and the Hajj will not suffice. Question 2. A person who has not performed the Tawaf and Nisa of Umrah Mufrada is to carry out the Hajj al-Ifrat subsequently. Would Tawaf and Nisa the Hajj al-Ifrat suffice for him or not? Answer: it will not suffice. Chapter 6. Staying overnight in Mina. It is obligatory for the pilgrims to spend the nights preceding the 11th and 12th of Dhul Hijjah in Mina. That is to say, they should stay there from sunset until midnight or from midnight until sunrise. Those who hold vigil in Makkah and engage in worship until the morning without doing anything else other than what is exigent, such as eating and drinking as needed, and renewing the wud, who do not have to spend the nights preceding the 11th and the 12th in Mina. Remaining in Mina for the said 3 nights could extend from the evening until midnight or from midnight until sunrise. Staying overnight in Mina is an act of worship and should be performed with pure intention for the satisfaction of Almighty Allah. SWT. One who abstains from remaining in Mina on the nights, which are obligatory, should sacrifice 1 sheep for each night he misses. Based on precaution, the sacrifice should be offered if the pilgrim fails to spend the night at Mina either knowingly and deliberately, or forgetfully and unknowingly. The kafara for hunting should be offered in Mecca during Umrah and in Mina during Hajj. Based on precaution, the same should apply to other instances of kafara. Question 1. What would happen if one stays overnight in a place other than Mina? Are those ignorant of this precept excused or not? Answer: he should offer a sacrifice. Based on precaution, there is no difference between those aware and those ignorant of this precept. Question 2. After performing the 3-fold rites of the day of the Eid, a pilgrim wants to go to Mecca to perform the tawafs, but he knows that if he goes to Mecca, he would not be able to spend the first 3 hours of the required period in Mina. Should he go to Mecca or not? Does he have to pay kafara for going to Mecca in this case? Answer: in this case, there is nothing wrong with going from Mina to Mecca, but kafara should be given for delay, unless he spends the entire second half of the night in Mina. Chapter 7. Rami al-Jamr. Rami al-Jamrat should be performed on the days following nights that are obligatory to be spent in Mina. Rami al-Jamrat means throwing pebbles at the 3 jamr or the symbolic satans, namely the ones in the front, the middle, and the rear. The pilgrim should daily throw 7 pebbles at each jamra. The manner, condition, and obligations of Rami have already been presented in the previous part on Jamarat al-Aqaba. Pebbles should be thrown from sunrise until sunset on the morrow of the night the pilgrim spends in Mina. Rami should not be carried out at night. People with excuses not to perform the Rami during the day, such as shepherds, sick ones, impotent individuals, and those fearing something such as the huge crowds, are allowed to perform the Rami on the night of the same day or on the next night. Rami should be carried out in order. The front, the middle, and the rear jamr should be respectively hit with pebbles. A person who forgets to perform the Rami and leaves Mina should return and perform the Rami. If he cannot return, he should hire a naib. If the tashriq period has passed, he should return, based on necessary precaution, and perform Rami or hire a naib. He or his naib should perform the kadha the following year. Secondary issues related to the Rami. Women and their caretakers, as well as weak people, who are allowed to arrive in Mina from the Mashar al-Haram after midnight, can engage in Rami at night if they have excuses not to perform it during the day. Women are allowed to engage in Rami at night. Rami al-Jamarat can be done from the upper floor, though, based on recommended precaution Iqyat mustahab, it should be conducted from the conventional place of the past ground level. Those who have excuses not to engage in Rami on the day of the Eid can do so on the preceding or following night of the Eid. If they also have excuses not to conduct Rami on the 11th of Dhul-Hijjah, they can perform the relevant Rami of the 11th on its night. Question 1. Can one conduct the Rami at night without having any excuses? If Rami at night is correct, does it involve a sin? Likewise, although delay in Dhihib on the day of Eid al-Quban is a right, does it involve a sin? Answer. Rami cannot be done at night without an excuse. If one does not conduct Rami during the day without having a valid excuse, he would be committing a sin. Likewise, based on the awat, if he deliberately delays the Dhihib and does not perform it on the day of the Eid, he would be committing a sin, though his Dhihib would be correct. Question 2. Can one throw the pebbles at the cement-made part of the column? Answer. If the cement-made part were conventionally regarded as a constituent of the column Jamra, Rami would be correct. Question 3. Due to overcrowding and possible dangers, is it possible to bring the women from Mashar to Mina after the midnight of the 10th of Dhul-Hijjah, take them to Jamra Aqaba on the same night for Rami, return them to the tents, and again take them to the Jamrat close to the sunset on the 11th to perform the Rami of both the 11th and the 12th on the night of the 12th? Answer. After Wuquf in Mashar and arrival in Mina, women can perform Rami Jamra al-Aqaba on the night before Eid al-Quban, but they could perform the Rami on the 11th and the 12th that night, only if they have excuses not to perform them during the day. Miscellaneous issues. One has the option of Castor and Itmam for the daily prayers all over the 2 holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Apparently, the precept applies to the 2 cities as they stand, without any distinction between their former and new districts. But, based on the awat, in this case, one should suffice but the limits of the past Mecca and Medina, or rather the Masjid Ain Sharafain, the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and the Masjid Nabawi in Medina. If due to an excuse, such as illness, a pilgrim has failed to take off his stitched clothes in order to enter the state of Ihram, he should make niyah for Umrah and Salat or Hajj and pronounce the labbaik at the miqat or areas parallel to it. This would suffice. Whenever he is relieved of the excuse, he should remove the stitched clothes and enter the state of Ihram. He, however, does not have to return to miqat, but, Based on Ayat Wajib, he should offer a sheep as sacrifice for having worn stitched clothes. Kafara should be given to the poor and the needy. A person who made intention for Ikama Ashra in Makkah retains his intention upon going to Arafat and Mina and returning. His prayer would be itmam at all these sites. Question 1. Should prayer be performed all over again if a person has engaged in istidara prayer in the Masjid al-Haram such that he faced the congregation prayer leader or stood on his sides? Answer: there is no need to perform it all over again, and it is permissible. Question 2. In purifying the Masjid al-Haram, the nijasa is removed and it is then washed with water. Khalil water is used to wash each side and one becomes aware of the nijasa of the entire masjid. Can one engage in sajda on those stones due to distress or difficulty or some other reason? Answer: one cannot gain awareness about this issue and should disregard any doubt that may arise. Question 3. A pilgrim, after performing all the rites of Umrah and Hajj, realized that his wud was null and void. Would his Hajj be considered correct if he makes provisions for the tawafs and prayer? Supposing that his Hajj would become invalidate, how should he be relieved of ihram? And what duty does he shoulder? Answer: yes, by making provisions for the tawafs and the prayer his Hajj would be correct. Glossary of how meritorious. Hakim decrees or injunctions. Plural of hukam. Awat, greater precaution or care. Arafat, the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, when the pilgrims assemble at the place outside Makkah, known as the Plain of Arafat. Asr, afternoon. Aqwa, what is stronger or more forceful. Ashwat, rounds or turns, plural of shot. Badal, gift, present. Badly Hajj, gifting of Hajj, sending someone on Hajj as a way of generosity. Bait Allah al-Haram, the sacred house of Allah. Dihib, slaughtering, animal sacrifice. Al-Qwa, ban, feast of sacrifice celebrated on 10th Dhul Hijjah. Fardhat, an indispensable religious duty. Fuqaha, jurisprudence. Fusuq, disobedience to the commands of God, committing sins. Gair ul-Maram, one who is not Maram. Ghusl, ritual bathing. Hadath Akbar, major impurity requiring ghusl. Hadath Asgar, minor impurity requiring wudhu. Hadi, animal sacrifice, sacrificial offering. Haid, menstruating. Hajar al-Aswad, the black stone. Hajj, pilgrimage. Hajjat ul-Islam, the obligatory Hajj pilgrimage in Islam. Haji, pilgrim. Hajj Makati, Hajj, which starts from one of the Malakit or the specified places where pilgrims are required to assemble. Hajj Nayabi, pilgrimage performed on one's behalf. Halal, permitted, religiously lawful. Halq, complete shaving of the head. Haram, prohibited, religiously unlawful. Haram, sanctuary, sacred precincts. Harwala, with a fast pace. Haid, menstruation. Hijab, Islamic mode of dressing and covering for women. Hair Ismail, the semicircular 1.3-meter high wall on the northern side of the Kaaba, where Ismail and his mother Hajar are buried. Hajj, pilgrims. Hakam, religious decree or injunction, acts of worship. Ibadat, acts of worship. Idin, permission. Itirar, exigency, urgency, emergency, need. Itirari, based on exigency, exigent, emergency. Ihram, state of pilgrim sanctity, which a pilgrim of Hajj or Umrah assumes on reaching Mikat. Ihya, precaution, reservation. Ikhtiyar, choice. Ikhtiyari, based on choice, optional. Istidar, circular. Istighfar, seeking forgiveness. Istibab, considering an act as mustahab, recommendable. Istita, capability. Itmam, reciting the prayer completely as opposed to the shortened prayer of the traveler. The jidal, quarreling, swearing. Janaba, major ritual, impurity caused by sexual intercourse or the like. Jabr, a wud, is special kind of ablution for one who has bandages or the like on the parts that should be washed during wudhu. Junub, one who is in the state of janaba. Hafara, expiation, atonement. Comes 1/5 levy. Kifaya, being sufficient, sufficiency, competence, capability. Cur, water, weighing about 384 kilograms, which does not become najis if nijasa reaches it. Medina. Ma'fil dima, an act or deed that is incumbent on the pilgrim and should duly be discharged. Maghrib, sunset. Mahram, relations with whom marriage is not permissible, such as father, mother, stepfather, stepmothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, grandfathers, grandmothers, grandsons, granddaughters, maternal or paternal uncles and aunts, nieces, nephews, grandnephews and grandnieces, father-in-law and mother-in-law, son-in-law and daughter-in-law, wet nurses, etc. Consequently, husband and wife are considered mar'an to each other. Mecca, mal alijar wages paid to a person hired as a naib. Marja taklid religious authority for following such as the chief jurisprudence. Masjid mosque. Madaf place for conducting the tawaf. Mawakit the place is permissible for halting. Mawakit plural of mikat. Mikat a number of stations outside Mecca from where the pilgrims intending Hajj or Umrah assume ihram. Muba permissible, allowed. Mud dry measure equal to 800 grams. Muharam at acts and things that are religiously unlawful. Muhil one who has been relieved from ihram, non-muhrim. Muhrim a pilgrim in the state of ihram. Mukalaf one who has reached the age of taklif. Mustahab desirable though not obligatory, recommended. Mustasan praiseworthy, commendable. Mustadi a person possessing capability istita. Mualat continuity without break. Nader vow. Nafaka maintenance. Necessary living expenses. Nafla prayer. Supererogatory prayer. Nay deputy. Najis ritual unclean. Nivas puerperal period. Nijas or ritual uncleanness. Niyaba deputation. Niya intention. Thew. Kata settling a wajibak which had not been performed in time. Not performed but due. Kali a little in quantity. Less than cur. Kasa reciting 2 rakah instead of the 4 rakah prayer during a journey exceeding 23 kms. Cur the recitation of the Quran in the prayer. Rakah unit of the length of prayer. Rami 3-fold throwing of stones at al-jamarat or symbolic satans. Ruck an essential part or pillar. Sajda prostration. Short round. Turn. Tahara purity. Cleanness. Talal relief from the state of ihram. Taklif age in which one becomes mature and thus responsible for performing Islamic duties. Taksir partial shortening of the hair on the head. Tashrik period the 3 days following Eid al-Quban. Tawaf 7-fold circumambulation of the Kaaba. Tayammum statutory dry ablution with soil, sand, etc. Util change of purpose by the name. Umrah in common usage visit. In religious texts paying a visit to the Beit Allah al-Haram, the sacred house of Allah, i.e. the holy Kaaba. Mufrada Umrah performed independently of Hajj. Wajib span. Wajib religiously obligatory. Wajib Hajj obligatory pilgrimage. Wajib ul Hajj one for whom Hajj has become obligatory. Wajibat obligatory acts and deeds. Wali guardian. Heir. Wikala deputation. Wadhu ablution with water. Wujub obligation. Wuja chario religiously due sums, religious payments. Wukuf stop. Halt. Wukuf feign the 2 stays. Zawal time when the sun crosses the meridian. Ziyarah visit. Ur noon. Topic tags. Islamic Law 6 Hajj 7. Author S. Sayyid Ali Khamenei 1. Publisher S. Islamic Culture and Relations Organization 2. Person tags. Sayyid Ali Khamenei 1. Source URL https://www.alislam.org Manasik rituals Hadith Sayyid Ali Khamenei comments 0.